Hello and welcome to the TTI Distribution Download, the podcast where we talk about all things happening in the world of electronic components with the specialists of TTI. And now, your host for the TTI Distribution Download, Paula Renfrow.
Thanks, Jim. Hey, everybody. Thanks for plugging into the TTI Distribution Download. This episode, we're welcoming back to the studio TTI Transportation Specialist, Gabe Osorio. Hey, Gabe.
Hey, Paula. How are you?
Oh, good. Thanks for coming back. It's good to have you in the booth, and it's been a while. We've missed you.
It has been too long. Thanks for having me back. Absolutely. It's great to be down here at corporate again.
Well, we always enjoy it when you're here.
Thank you.
For our first-time Gabe Osorio listeners, Gabe is the Director of Supplier Marketing for TTI's highly specialized transportation business unit and a regular contributor to the Distribution Download. I always learn something new when Gabe is here, and I always know we can count on Gabe to bring us some insight into today's mobility solutions. Shall we, my friend?
Yeah, let's do it.
Today, we're diving into a topic that's generating a lot of buzz in the engineering world and really in the consumer world, and that's the resurgence of hybrid electric vehicles. Gabe, will you start us off today by getting us all on the same page? What is driving this renewed interest in hybrid vehicles?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, it's good to define kind of what segment of transportation we're talking about with that, right? It's definitely tied to automotive primarily, but certainly there's applications outside of that in commercial vehicle and light duty truck and maybe even some construction and agriculture as well too. But as it's related to automotive, I think what you see happening today, if you think back maybe even 2-3 years ago, there was, especially during COVID and the pandemic, there was a huge ramp up of electrification. Lots of investment that was made by the North American Big Three, now Big Four, if you include Tesla in there, around electric vehicles and going all electric, and a lot of commitment that was made both financially and from a directional standpoint of where OEMs were headed to move platforms all electric. Well, I think what you're seeing take place is the market kind of say, hey, whoa, we're not quite ready for that. And then I think from a financial perspective and from a regulation perspective, there's also been a pause or at least a slowdown of that, which I think is actually a good thing because the increase that took place, or the growth, I should say, that took place so quickly wasn't very sustainable.
And this is an infrastructure, a lot, yep.
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, it certainly is. How are you going to charge these vehicles, right? Not everybody has the ability, you think about a condo owner or an apartment, somebody who lives in an apartment, right? You're not always going to have that ability to be able to charge your car at home. So you're going to rely on those supercharger stations or just EV charger stations that are out in the public locations in general. Not enough of those. Yes, there's investment being made. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if you saw the news yesterday, but the current administration actually released funding from the previous administration's infrastructure bill meant for more charging station growth and investment. So that's exciting from that standpoint that those funds will be pushed out into different states and stuff like that to be able to grow those opportunities for charging infrastructure. But really, I think it was tied to those kind of things where the public, I think, spoke with their wallet and said, we're not ready for full EVs. Yes, you have I'm going to call it an outlier, but it's really more of an innovator in Tesla that's kind of leading the way from that perspective. But I think there's a lot of adoption that's already taken place with their cars, with their vehicles, and really the culture surrounding that company. But as you start to think about proliferation of electric cars, it's still got a long way to go. So hybrid vehicles make a great intermediary step and actually are a lot of fun to drive. We had a conversation earlier today, right, where I mentioned the car rental I have today is actually a hybrid, and it was really interesting to watch on my drive from the airport here to the corporate office how much of the time was spent in electric mode versus internal combustion mode was right about 50-50, and that makes sense sitting in traffic.
Yeah.
So those hybrids are great. I think the range on the car said something like close to 500 miles, which is unbelievable. are fantastic, and really cool to see that hybridized system in action, right, and in place. So it's a great kind of stepping stone, I think, into a fully electric vehicle to allow us time for, one, adoption by the public, and then two, for the growth of infrastructure to actually take place over time. Because again, I think in previous conversations you and I have had, there's a lot of investment that has to take place, both from a governmental perspective, right, on the infrastructure, a utility perspective, and even down to private investment that has to be made, much like even putting in, let's say, EV chargers here at our own corporate office, right? So there's a lot of work to do, but hybrids provide a great step.
Yeah, they really do. And as an early adopter, I think we've talked about that before. I'm at least 8 years in, maybe 9-10 years in on driving a hybrid.
Yep.
So to me, of course, this is not something new, but so really the question, are we seeing a surge in the adoption of the hybrid vehicles because now they've made a decision?
Yes. There
was no decision before, and now they've made a decision. We're not going electric, but we're also not going to continue to sit on the sideline?
I think you're spot on. And some of that might be driven both by the consumer, right? And you actually, when you look at the breakdown of cars sold today, hybrids are one of the fastest growing segments of vehicles that are growing in passenger cars, certainly. And some of that has to do with OEMs saying, we're going to take kind of that reinvestment of all electric and put it into the hybrid version. Yes. So there's more options available. For example, where they might have had maybe 1 or 2 hybrid options, now it's going maybe a little bit more across their platforms. So even pickup trucks, right, where pickup trucks are going to have a hybrid model where it's a 4-cylinder engine with a hybrid system attached to it and a turbocharge that now gives you the power that a V6 or a V8 engine might have before.
It really is a surprise, how much power you can get. Okay, let's talk about components. How about from a design engineer's perspective, what are the key innovations in, say, of course, I'm going to ask about our product lines, connectors, relays, power systems?
Yeah, there's a lot happening, and it's truly across the board from an electronic component perspective, especially as it's related to the supplier products that we provide. When you think about a hybrid system, you're not removing anything from the system, you're adding to it. So you're actually adding more content.
Because you still have that ICE, right?
Exactly. So there's now essentially 2 engines in a system, one electric and one combustion. So you're now adding controllers and a lot more communication that has to take place, data that needs to move, power, obviously. So the need for new, and then even in addition to that, high power, a smaller footprint. Because think of it, you're cramming more stuff under that hood that didn't necessarily exist there before. So a trend from an interconnect perspective, especially as you think of the orange high voltage connectors, is footprint, getting smaller and smaller, but pumping up the power that those smaller footprints can handle. And so we've got suppliers that are working on releasing smaller footprint products, again, that allow for higher power to move through them, which is really interesting to see. Certainly from when you start to think about passives and discretes, there's different things happening with the chemical composition of those components, right? To, again, drive more efficiencies. So you can think of silicon carbide versus the existing technology. You can think of relays and contactors and what they're doing from a switching power perspective and how much power they're going to be able to manage in a battery electric system, which maybe previously was 400 to 600 volts and is now pushing 1,000 plus volts in some cases based on the type of vehicle or system that is running. So there's a ton of stuff happening. And then again, going back to added content, there's a lot of noise under the engine now too, right? Or at least in tight quarters where you can't have maybe some noise from a high voltage power line interfering with an Ethernet cable that's trying to communicate a module. Yes, exactly. So a lot of the noise. EMI shielding and then heat dissipation as well too is going to be critical as well. So there's a lot taking place that really all spells opportunity for more design of componentry and different systems that are being made to help kind of manage all of these different problems that you have when you start combining two types of engines under one place.
Well, now that we're seeing this run up, this increase in popularity or this choice, as we're saying, at least for the immediate future, is that affecting component pricing? It would, supply and demand, though, also from an availability standpoint.
You would think, believe it or not, I think a couple different unique things have taken place. One, again, tying back to the explosive growth that EV investment, I should say, that was made.
Right.
That really drove prices kind of through the roof on a lot of stuff. Provided for some shortages, made it difficult to find a lot of things. I think with the pullback that we've seen from OEMs' investment in all electric vehicles has allowed for not only pricing to normalize or at least come back to where we would expect it to be. Now, granted,
those same types of components.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, granted, they are,
like you said, hybrid, that you have two things rather than one thing going on all electric.
Yep.
But there you go.
But I would say that granted, those components are going to be at a premium versus maybe the ICE side of the engine, just based on what they're doing. But they're certainly becoming more available, and I think not only more available from a supply chain perspective, but more available from a choice perspective, meaning a broader range of power. Again, more suppliers. Exactly. So you're maybe not necessarily single sourced. You've now got a range of choice, which I think is obviously going to be a really good thing from a development standpoint of the products. Again, going back to the miniaturization side of things, we've got multiple suppliers that we can source from with different types of smaller interconnects that are available, and different, again, composition of the components themselves as well too, being a big factor in there as well. So I think overall the availability of product has become better, and the choice of product has become a lot better as well too, and it's going to continue to do so. Most of the trade shows we've gone to this year, and as a matter of fact, the upcoming battery show, which is all around electrification, in October, it's very fascinating to still see the high level of EV design that's taking place, even if it is in a hybrid model, with customers and designers and engineers and OEMs asking for more of the same product in different variations, right?
So how do you help them? When you're meeting in the trade shows and such, what value can you bring?
It's a little bit of everything, right? It's one, being a source of knowledge for what we currently have available today, but it's also doing some collection of voice of customer and trying to understand what is needed out there that we don't have available today, and relaying that to our supplier manufacturers, that we can have those conversations, look for maybe those unique opportunities for a customized option, and or help guide them to where the market is telling us we need to be on a specific product or a power level or whatever it might be from that standpoint. So it's kind of a mixed bag of helping the supplier, but also really trying to help customers obviously find what's available today that we can help get in your hands for your design.
Right, because not every design engineer is with an OEM that's large enough to have that direct voice, right?
That's right. Yeah, we talk to a lot of startups, obviously, that don't have those direct supplier contacts, and we provide a lot of support for them, for those EV guys, and not just in the automotive space. Again, it's across the board in transportation.
In all transportation. So these hybrid systems are bringing these unique engineering challenges, really, and electric elements. So what are some of the design hurdles that engineers are facing, and how are they getting over them? While they're waiting for you to bring their ideal solution, how are they getting over these hurdles?
There is a lot. There's a lot taking place from that perspective, right? Certainly, again, I go back to the packaging size, right? Packaging and footprint are a huge concern, because I like to talk about electronification, right? In vehicles. It's the addition of more componentry in the same amount of space that you had before. So
that your automobile has more features.
Exactly. Automobile or your construction vehicle might have more safety systems involved in it that it didn't have before. You might have some level of autonomy associated with your vehicle. So all of that brings a whole host of challenges from where do you put it? How do you put it in your vehicle? How does it move data or power throughout your vehicle safely and correctly? And then not only that, it's all the noise from all of those competing systems. how do you make sure that they're not interfering with each other as well too? So a lot of the unique challenges are around power management and heat, right? So how do you manage the temperature of your system in the vehicle? And then how do you make sure you can fit it where it needs to go, usually adjacent to an engine and or somewhere on a chassis that's going to be exposed to a lot of different crazy elements, temperature, vibration, and all of those things. So what we ask for, or what we're looking for from suppliers, right, is components that can handle that harsh environment, that handle temperature well, or at least can help dissipate it well. And again, small packaging that offers higher power in those small packaging. And that's a lot to ask, because that's certainly not an easy undertaking when you take a connector that might be the size of what started the size of my head for large power, that's come down to maybe the size of your fist.
Right. Yeah.
Which is pretty impressive.
So without naming names, customers and such, what's the, do you have an example, crazy example of this idea of, I don't have quite the right component, but I just know I got to have this feature? You know where I'm going?
A little bit.
What's this silly, crazy?
Yeah, there's all kinds of things.
Seemingly be silly and crazy, but obviously it works.
Well, something that you probably wouldn't think of that would need electrification, right? So we have an example where there's an oil field rig, essentially. So a device or a trailer that's out in an oil field, has a lot of different systems that come off at pumps, you name it, right? It's got a little bit of everything, some power conversion, all that kind of stuff. They actually use a inverter from a major OEM in the agriculture world that they put on their system, and then power some of those auxiliary systems with high voltage power. So they've electrified now an oil rig machine out in the middle of, could be out in the middle of northern Canada, could be out in the U.S. somewhere on an oil
West
field.
Texas, yeah.
Exactly, somewhere like that, where now they're using a certain level of electrification to power maybe half of the componentry, or half of the systems that are running on this device.
And this was because we've talked about the ag manufacturers, ag equipment, they are just a little more advanced in their research and their production.
I think they're a little bit more nimble in that they produce smaller volume of units, let's say, right? So you don't, there might be 14 million cars made in North America, but from a combine perspective, there's maybe going to be 15,000, right? And don't quote me on those numbers, but they're close.
So their R&D is much easier to. That's probably not the right way to turn.
It's a little quicker to move into.
Quicker to turn, yeah.
Or at least to adopt or to try something different and unique, because it doesn't take the same amount of investment that it might to change out, a whole production line for a F-150 or something like that. So,
right, and then if you're in the oil field, your usage is so skinny. It would be nice to rely on someone else's R&D.
That's exactly right. So there's a lot of integration like that. That's really cool. So, but what that did do was, going back to your question about, is there something that they're asking for that we didn't know? You can think about the harsh environment that those rigs are going to be operating in. So the request was for just unbelievable amount of protection on the interconnects from a sealing perspective, from a temperature rating extremes that we hadn't really seen before, that you don't typically see outside of maybe a few work trucks or something that are working in the ice fields in northern Canada or something like that. And it was challenging to try to find interconnects that met those specs, passive components, discretes, MOSFETs, you name it, right? Anything that could go on a PCB board or be an interconnect product, or even sensors and cameras. Think about that. Trying to operate in those conditions as well too. So it's been challenging to try to find the right products, and they do exist, but not necessarily readily available as some of the mainstream or more widely used products that we see from these suppliers as well too. But that's part of the challenge, and that's obviously part of the big value that TTI can bring, and our team specifically is understanding what's available from those suppliers and knowing when and where to try to find them.
Yeah, being specialized on both ends, right? I mean, from a transportation perspective, mobility perspective, but also having a set of commodity items that you can focus on. Though I'm sure that still doesn't make it easy.
No,
but
no.
fun.
It's fun, yeah, and it's super interesting, right? Because we find all these unique and very cool applications where we can find these types of opportunities, which
That's
is
what I
always
was
exciting.
thinking.
Yeah.
I always look forward to you being here because there's always fun and exciting things. But pitfalls, oversights that you see designers making in these hybrid systems. Yeah,
there's the one that jumps to mind that we see a lot is maybe over-design, where there's a thought process that can exist in design community where I need very high standard of sealing, maybe crazy amount of range for a temperature to both the high end and the low end, when really maybe you operate in a 20% space of that requirement, right?
And this makes it expensive and specialty
Precisely.
hard to get.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So you by constraining to those requirements so tightly, restricting obviously the available product group that's available and adding expense that's maybe unnecessary and probably some heartache from a supply chain side of things as well too, because they're just not as widely used as some of the more common products. So a lot of the conversation we have with engineers and customers is trying to understand, okay, I see that you've got these very stringent requirements that are way outside of our norm that we see. Can you tell us a little bit about, is that operating at that temperature the whole time? Is it operating at that power at the whole time? And trying to really get through to where can we be from a product standpoint that gives you the most available option, but maybe handles most of your requirement, or at least can support all of that in small spurts, right? Because not everything is black and white in terms of I need it to be rated to 150C. Maybe it's only for 5 minutes, or maybe it's only for half an hour, or whatever that might look like, right? So there's all kinds of different nuances that can come into it. That is a huge challenge that we do see quite a bit. And then I think in addition to that would be, it's on the component makeup side, is understanding as new products get released that are made from a different material, for example, silicon
You mentioned
carbide.
that earlier, right? So talk to us about the silicon carbide.
So
what's exciting about that?
Its capability,
Okay.
and the ability for it to be potentially less expensive as well too, but also give you broader availability from the spec perspective, meaning higher temps, higher vibration, different packaging, easier to source from a precious metals standpoint, or at least from the raw material standpoint. So there's a lot of benefits, but it's a kind of a slow adopter, I'll say, in the automotive world, as people are, as you would imagine, right? Why would I change something that is working so well if it's not broken yet? But there are some benefits, obviously, again, based on cost, based on efficiency, and how well the product can actually perform under those extreme temperature and power ratings that customers are asking for today. So those
this
are
is
probably
an
two
education, an education issue.
Yeah, it's education, and it's probably a comfort. It's a comfort thing, because it's a not a widely used technology yet, but it's one that I think is growing every single year, and eventually will probably grow to be the norm. But it's going to take some time.
Yeah, the idea of making engineers more comfortable, potentially.
Yes.
So remind me, this seems like a good time. How many double E's do you have on your team in the transportation business unit?
Yeah, great question. So the team is made up of 7, very specific sales engineers focused on transportation.
In the Americas.
In the Americas. Yep, exactly. And on that team, we've got, I believe the breakdown is 4 double E's, and the remaining 3 are MEs, or mechanical engineers. So all of them have an engineering background. Most of them did design work either on a wire harness for a transportation,
life,
or did PCB board design work or magnetics work or something along those lines. So all of them have a tremendous amount of history, both from the design perspective and now on the product component selection perspective as well too, which is really good.
I wanted to be sure to make that clear too, that when you say we're asking the design design engineer customer to consider being more comfortable. You know what you're asking.
That's right. Yep.
So.
Yep. And obviously we partner very closely with the resources that our manufacturer suppliers provide us as well too, and are doing a lot of the forefront. As a matter of fact, right before coming into this podcast, I was trying to catch up on a call that was taking place right now to learn about some new products coming from another supplier as well too. So that's a constant education that we're going through to be able to help educate the customers and engineers that we're engaged with as well.
Yeah,
too.
it really takes a village, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's look ahead. Speaking of village, emerging technologies like we talked about this on another podcast, sodium-ion batteries. We talked about batteries the size of your head and how they needed to get smaller.
That's right.
Wireless charging. So what do you think is going to reshape how engineers approach hybrid and EV design in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, it's wild.
2 years even, if it's that exciting.
There's so much. I mean, there's so much that's happening. Certainly the battery one is a great perspective, right? Because, we talk about the different uses that batteries have. I'm sure you've seen what feels like explosive use of e-bikes, right? And think about those all have small batteries in them. And we work with customers that build those batteries for those bikes as well, too, all the way up to tractor trailers now having batteries put on them, right? To help kind of push the vehicle along as well too. So the wide range of both battery sizes, battery power output, as well as what the makeup of that battery is. As you mentioned, sodium ion versus lithium ion versus solid state, and all of the others that are coming out, and the constant experiment that is taking place from what is the best composition for a battery to get the most life out of, to hold the most charge and do all that kind of stuff. So that's constantly changing. Going back to charging, there's a really cool thing that I saw in Europe taking place that's very, very interesting, especially for urban settings, which is they're building chargers into the curb so that you would, vehicles.
The space is so.
Exactly. Yeah. And vehicles are much smaller in Europe, right? Yeah. And not our big trucks that we drive here or SUVs, but parking into a small space, and you would get your charge cord out of your car, because that's how the European model is. Yep. Plug it into the car, and then you plug it into a plug in the actual curb and or somewhere in the infrastructure. That just makes more sense to me already. It's fantastic.
It's easy. Yeah.
Along those lines, wireless charging too, as well. So, for example, if you've got a plug-in hybrid,
that seems like it'd take a really long time.
Well, you'd be surprised. Some of those actually move faster or as fast as some of the superchargers would, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and it's amazing technology because there's a plate on the bottom of your vehicle that matches up with a plate that's built into the cement or asphalt or whatever that might be, and as it rolls over it, it begins to charge. So think about the different applications you could do with that. Think of a truck driving down the freeway in a single lane that's just being charged the entire time, similar to like a cable car would have been back, in history. Right. Or going to a store and you park your EV and it gets 30 minutes of charge while you're buying some groceries or whatever you're doing. Right. So a lot of really cool applications for that coming in the future as well too, I think.
We're
probably still some time out from that. And then I think, even one step further is all of the autonomy that's coming into vehicles.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever had the chance. I've gotten the fortunate ability to ride in a Waymo vehicle. A little unsettling at first, to trust that the vehicle is going to do what it's going to do. But watching the technology take place in real life, sitting in the car and riding in the car while it's doing it, it's pretty amazing how far it's come in what feels like a short amount of time. I mean, obviously we've been working, or these customers have been working on this technology for 10 plus years, but it feels like, boy, has this happened overnight. Yeah, yes, exactly. Yes. And it's really, really interesting to see the cool applications that we're going to have for that, because the level of safety that it will bring someday, obviously you hear about incidents and things like that happen now as the technology is learning and they're building the models for this and the mapping. But in the future, trucking is going to be a great opportunity for autonomy, where the amount of accidents can be reduced, and the dangers that's involved with that can be reduced. I spent some time this morning talking about construction and agriculture and being able to manage large fields or large presences by sending out your autonomous tractors.
Making them more efficient.
Yep,
right.
Exactly. And being able to process more in a shorter period of time, maybe take advantage of not losing crop or whatever that might be. There's a lot of opportunity that's right for that. And then I think even lastly is...
You could almost go lights out, couldn't you?
Yeah. Potentially.
Right? Because it's just autonomous. You're like, we're going to bed now.
Or at least 24 hours a day.
The tractor's going to keep running.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Especially if it's electric and it's being regeneratively charged somehow. There's the possibilities are endless from that standpoint. The last thing I was going to mention is just last mile delivery. So obviously that's a huge segment of transportation. Everything from your Amazon Rivian trucks that you see rolling around to future bots that might be delivering product to your door, to even something a little outside of what our traditional transportation is, but the drone deliveries that would be bringing in stuff. So there's a lot of opportunity for autonomy, for electrification, for all of these in a multitude of applications. So it's really exciting to see what's been taking place over the course of just the last 6 months. But while we are focused very intently on North America, or at least this group is, our colleagues across the globe, right, both in Asia and in Europe, are doing the same thing, just in their regions. And in Europe, they've certainly adopted electrification, especially in passenger car, really across the board in transportation, but in passenger cars specifically, a lot quicker than we have in North America for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah, gasoline prices is one, isn't it?
Certainly. Traditional cars there, traditional ICE, internal combustion cars were diesel as well too.
Oh, that's right.
So the changeover was a little bit easier to adopt to based on miles driven, because you think the average, I shouldn't say the average, but the commute is typically shorter, especially in urban areas, right, or densely populated areas. And the vehicle size is much smaller as well too. So you don't need as large of a battery, you don't need as large, and so on and so forth. So, and then on top of that, regulation preceded the technology as well too. So the European Union set forth mandates, obviously, to electrify, car manufacturers, et cetera, and adoption was quick. And then infrastructure followed as well too, though. That's the key, right? So it's that regulation and infrastructure in Europe is probably 5, maybe 10 years ahead of where we are. 10 might be a little much, but certainly 5. I think it serves as a great example, though, as to what can happen in a region when you do adopt even a certain level of electrification.
When there's infrastructure support.
That's right, yeah. And the systems behind it to be able to actually allow it to proliferate and become useful. So
once again, Gabe, it has been a treat to have you in the booth today. But before we wrap up, let me ask you this. What do you hope our listeners take away from today's episode?
Yeah, a few different things. One, that it's an exciting time to be a design engineer in this field and working with these type of customers. There is so much technological advancement, both from the component side of things to the actual end device that's using them or end product, and it's really exciting to be a part of that. The second thing is we've got a host of technical expertise that's ready to help and assist with that design process. And then along with that, we've got the best manufacturers to partner with, to work with, to help support those designs as well too. So that kind of deadly combination of excitement around the technology, the expertise that we have on this team, and then the quality of suppliers that we have available to us to select from and to provide options for are tremendous. So it makes our job a lot easier on a day-to-day basis, being able to do that, and much more exciting as well too, which is good. So I think those would be my takeaways. Yeah.
Well, thank you again for being here, Gabe.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paula. It's been great, and definitely look forward to our next time, hopefully in the near future.
Me too. Let's try not to take so much time in between next time.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Great seeing you.
And for those of you out there, if you want to connect with Gabe or any of our TTI transportation specialists, reach out to your local branch. It's a simple call. You can remember this, 1-800-CALL-TTI. Thank you again, Gabe, and I want to thank our listeners for plugging in. If, like me, you've learned something today, you can learn more from Gabe and other TTI subject matter experts at tti.com/marketeye. Until next time, I'm Paula Renfrow, and this is the TTI Distribution Download.
That's it for this episode of the TTI Distribution Download. For more information on any of the topics you heard about today, reach out to your nearby TTI branch at 1-800-CALL-TTI or visit us online at tti.com.